Hi, everybody. It's Mike from Hear the Watchman and the Watchman Report. Today on the Watchman Report, we have an exciting guest, Mr. Simon Roche, coming to us currently from Ohio, but he hails from South Africa. And folks, he has some very interesting information for you about what is going on in South Africa today. Simon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike.
Simon, we don't necessarily get the truth over here. As you know, our media, our mainstream media here, only tells us what they want us to hear. However, through meeting Brindy Wells, John B. Wells' wife, I have been informed of things going on in South Africa that, quite frankly, are frightening. Tell us what's going on in South Africa and tell us about what you're doing.
Mike, there's a hang of a lot going on in South Africa at the moment, economically, socially, politically, crime-wise as well. Since the African National Congress Party of Nelson Mandela took over on the 27th of April 1994, we've seen quite a drastic decline in the conditions of South Africa in every sphere, from education to health and especially crime. At the moment, there's a crime wave happening, which is largely targeting white people in South Africa. And we now have a situation in which the economy is also under terrible strain. And between those two things, it looks as if we might be staring some sort of catastrophe in the face. And therefore, our organization, which is Saatlanders, it's a civil defense organization constituted under international law, the largest non-state civil defense organization in the world, is preparing for a race-based civil war. In other words, the international laws, the applicable laws, make specific provision for, in the event of an armed conflict, that any identifiable group, such as an ethnic group, which does not wish to participate in an armed conflict, may withdraw from that conflict and declare itself a non-party to the conflict. And that is what we intend to facilitate in the event of this civil war, which many black leaders are talking about now, a race-based civil war, such as our former judge president has recently described, such as a brother to one of our former national presidents has recently described, and the leader of one of our biggest political parties. Should that come to pass, that there is a race-based civil war directed at white people, our organization, Saatlanders, will endeavor to take our people, as per international law, out of the cities and into safe havens.
Now that's amazing that this is all going on. I was looking through your website. And can you spell your website for our listeners so they know how to get to it?
Yes, there's no www, so it's just SUIDLANDERS.org. SUIDLANDERS.org.
Awesome. Now, when I went to your website, I read about in there that, is it true that there's literally riots going on in Cape Town?
Yes. The night before last, I arrived here in Ohio at 11 o'clock at night and was picked up at the airport by my host here in Ohio. And while we were driving to the place where we're staying, I was describing to him from my telephone our national emergency text message system. Our organization has a national emergency text message system. And from that day only, there were 8 rioting incidents in which buildings were burnt down, national highways were blocked by minibuses. We call them taxis in South Africa. They're like little shuttle buses that take black people to and from work and home, completely blocking off freeways. And burning tires and other things, buildings being burnt down. And that was in one day in 8 different regions in South Africa.
That's frightening, Simon. That truly is frightening to hear. Now, the black population and the white population in South Africa have had tension for years. What has brought this all to a head right now?
I think that it's I think that it's just the passage of time, to be honest, Mike. I don't think that particular things have sparked it. I think the tension has sparked particular incidents rather than the other way around. And since 1994, when Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress took power, there has been a lingering resentment. And over time, many black political parties have become more outspoken about white privilege, white guilt, white shame, white wealth. And so there have been calls for the expropriation without compensation of all white-owned land. A bill was prepared, a parliamentary bill, a governmental bill, which wasn't passed, but it was prepared, in which it was specifically described that all white property, not just land, property, unqualified, should be liable to expropriation. In other words, they can come and take your house, your car, your boat, your motorcycle, your shoes, the clothes off your back. As I say, it wasn't passed, but that gives you some indication of the zeitgeist, the feeling of the times amongst black people. There have been talks of sort of a guilt tax being paid by white people, and recently our currency was downgraded to junk status by three major ratings agencies. Our sovereign bond rating has gone to junk, and this is in a country where once upon a time it cost $2 to buy one of our currency. In other words, we've seen a drastic decline in the economy. Yesterday, our unemployment figures were released, and the official figure is 38.1%. Now,
Whoa.
Under such circumstances, you can imagine that many white people have been or have become, particularly recently, openly critical of the government. You know, white people have gotten over the white guilt and shame thing, where everybody felt that even if they disagreed with it, there was some kind of obligation to toe the party line, to be nice about the new South African Rainbow Nation experiment, and just to shut up and you know, go along with things. But with these kind of dramatic crises, the crime and what have you, just in literally the space of about a year and a half at most, but more particularly over about 4 or 5 months, white people have become far more vocal about the ineptitude of the government and about the crazy things that the proletariat, for want of a better word, is talking about, such as the expropriation of all South African whites' land. And that has led to some black leaders, notably a man by the name of Mzwandile Masina, who's a very senior ANC leader, stating on Monday the 10th of April that if whites don't shut up and stop complaining, they will be eradicated within 5 years.
Man.
This is open.
Imagine, folks, to my listeners out there and our friends, imagine something like that happening in the United States, which, if we don't be careful, will happen here. I'm not saying between blacks and whites, but you all know that the Conservative Party, we're very afraid that martial law will be declared, that the FEMA camps will be put in place. So it's important for us to study what is going on in South Africa and to support people like Simon over there. Now, Simon, can you tell us, and I'm not asking you for exact numbers, but you have the white population and the black population.
Okay.
What is the numbers of that? Does the black population far outweigh the white population there in South Africa?
Yes, in loose terms, the overall population of South Africa is just under 56 million, of which about something under 5 million is white, something under 5 million is colored. That is to say, the mixed race people of South Africa insist upon being identified as colored. It's their ardent insistence that they be called colored. And then the Indian population, we have the second largest population of Indian people from India in the world, the second after India itself, is something under 5 million. And you are left with about 42 million black people. So, yes.
And so the political party there, the let's just call it the ruling political party in South Africa, is that made up of all the black population, or do you have white members of that party?
The African National Congress is overwhelmingly dominated by black people. I've done a tremendous amount of work for the African National Congress as a party, and also for the government, where the African National Congress is dominant as the ruling party. And so I think that I can give you an educated guess of something like 98% of the members of the African National Congress are black people.
So it must be very difficult to have the white party's voice heard.
Yes, well, there are a couple of white-dominated parties in our parliament. They're very vocal, very active, but it's difficult for them to make any impression upon the way things progress. You know, all they can do is shout and scream and stamp their feet on the floor and pull their hair out.
Well, I mean, at least you have that. Now, your organization is designed, then I take it, where if this armed conflict, or even, I mean, I suppose it doesn't even have to be armed. I mean, it could just be beatings and rioting. Your organization literally will go in there and get the white people who are threatened and take them out into safety?
No, not exactly, Mike. Our organization's, let's say, modus operandi in such a time of crisis, what we call the then, as opposed to the now. If the criteria, the strict criteria of the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions are met, and we are able to say, under international law, it is a matter of fact that there is an armed conflict that meets the criteria of international law, and the white population is being directly threatened, then we will coordinate a refugee exodus from the cities. And how it works is, right now, our organization is constructed a bit like, let's say, the Boy Scouts of America. We have little groups all over the country. Those little groups form regions, and regions form provinces, what we call provinces, not our national provinces. We, as an organization, Statelanders, have 27 provinces. Now, let's say you, for example, were a member of our organization, and it was now patently clear that there was a direct threat to you. We would send out a series of messages via WhatsApp, text messages, radio messages, cellular telephone calls, and so on, in a very, very short span of time. And we would say to you, Mike, jump in your SUV with your caravan hitched to the tow bar, and leave home with your stock of diesel fuel and baked beans. You would then join up with the other 9 or so families that comprise your local group and begin a refugee convoy. That refugee convoy would coalesce with other small convoys, forming streams which form rivers and so on and so forth, you know, as the convoys all join together. And you would then proceed under the direction of people on our national radio system. We have a high-frequency radio grid network which covers the whole of South Africa, and we have people who are trained who will be on those radios calling in to you, Mike, and saying, Mike, the road ahead of you is dangerous, or we've heard reports of bad things happening in the town down the road, take a detour, go on this farm road, take that gravel road, etc. And we would guide you to a safe haven, a small town where under international law we may declare the protection of international law. It's not a request, it's a declaration. So Mike and his family and another 100 families get to this town, and they declare under international law, in terms of the provisions made, that they do not wish to participate in any conflict, and that they are civilian, non-combatant refugees. And before I finish, Mike, if I may just throw in here, 3 weeks ago, our government summarily rescinded, without explanation, 2,100 ham radio licenses. Now, we know that that pertains specifically to us. Our nose is in the dirt, as it were. We're at the coalface. We know what we're talking about. And we are very clear in our minds as an organization that that was specifically intended to hamstring our ability to coordinate a refugee exodus in the event of a civil conflict.
Well, Simon, I mean, you sound like you're very well organized. You put a lot of thought has gone into this organization, and folks, trust me, this is what we're going to have to do here. There's no doubt. We're going to have an organization like this. It's coming. Now, Simon, is there a Muslim influence going on in South Africa right now?
No, there isn't. There is a significant population of Muslims in and around the coastal city of Durban on the east coast of South Africa, who came out from India. So along with Hindu Indians, and you know, these Muslim Indians came out about 130 years ago, but they are not tremendously politically active. There isn't Muslim unrest. There's also a historical Muslim population around the city of Cape Town, which originates from Malay slaves of 300 odd years ago. And once again, it's not a substantial, let us say, threat, for want of a better word. They are not restive people. They're not disruptive people. There have been some incidents in the past, but it's not a significant thing in our country.
Oh, that's a good thing for you guys. That's for sure. Now, Simon, in South Africa, is your organization well known amongst the white people there?
You know, Mike, it's much easier to read in the newspapers in South Africa about the results of the, I beg your pardon, of the over 70s Lawn Bowl League on a Monday morning than it is to read about Satelanders. We are the largest non-state civil defense organization in the world, and we are absolutely not addressed in the press whatsoever. It's clearly, you know, it's sort of like that Shakespearean quote, "Methinks the lady doth protest too much." The silence about us is so great that you know that it's contrived. If there was a little bit of coverage, you could say, well, there should be more by rights. But the fact that there's practically nil implies that it's deliberate, because it just doesn't stand to any reason whatsoever.
So what's occurring there, and what you see happening? Are we talking about being on the brink of a civil war or a revolution in South Africa? Well,
the brother of the president that I mentioned earlier on, Moeletsi Mbeki, said we are on the cusp. We are standing on the cusp of a race-based civil war. Our former judge president, so that the head of our Supreme Court of Appeals, said in about perhaps August of last year, perhaps prior to that, I don't recall exactly, that a race-based civil war in South Africa is imminent. So yes, we believe that a race-based civil war is what is brewing in South Africa, not because it suits us. We are predominantly family men, so we're the people who least want this thing. The fact that we're preparing for it is not indicative of some enthusiasm for it. Indeed, as a civil defense organization legally constituted under international law, we cannot even prepare militaristically. So we're not a militant organization. We're not insurrectionist. We're not seditionist. We're really just preparing to be slaughtered, not to put too fine a point on it, but we're not an optimistic organization. We don't believe that we're going to come through this very well. We believe that a race-based civil war is, however, what is transpiring before our eyes, what is emerging before our eyes.
And Simon, I know that, you know, we do this show, and John B. Wells, Lisa Haven, some of the other people that have shows and voices. We're not date setters by any means. We do a lot of prophecy work, and we always shy away from anyone that sets an exact date. But what, in your opinion, how much longer can it go on the way it is before it explodes?
Mike, it's very difficult to say, and I wouldn't like to stick my neck out, but I will say this, and it's something that people can verify for themselves. Saitlanders has been head and shoulders the most accurate forecaster of developments in South Africa, compared to any political organization, non-governmental organization, charity, you name it, because we're not hidebound by doctrine. In other words, we don't feel obliged to say, well, we think there's trouble coming, but apartheid was a very bad thing, or gee, things are not looking good, but we really, really love the new South Africa, or dear me, Nelson Mandela, what a sweet man and what a beautiful smile. We have been in the fortunate position of being able to say what we believe. And over time, we've been, as I say, head and shoulders the most accurate forecasters of developments in the country. And that is based on the fact that we have a background. Our organization was founded by a man named Gustav Muller, who is an expert, who was an expert in the South African Defence Force in military intelligence scenario planning and risk analysis. And with that in mind, now that I've sort of covered myself, I wouldn't like to be too candid, but I will say that we don't believe that this thing is years and years away. And that's as if you don't mind, I won't be more committal than that.
No, that's okay. But I think what we're capturing from you, Simon, is the powder keg is there and the fuse has been lit. And when it goes off, we're not sure, but you're preparing for that. Now, let's look on an international basis for a moment here. Are you getting any help internationally? Are there any countries that are paying attention to what's going on there and offering you assistance?
No, absolutely not. It's ironic because the people who we would expect to assist us are our cousins, our genetic cousins, you know, from Western Europe and North America. And yet it is far easier to be an Eritrean, you know, sort of refugee or claiming to be a refugee from Eritrea or anywhere in Africa than it is to be a hardworking person from South Africa and get a refugee status. Bear in mind, Mike, that the murder rate of white South Africans by blacks is over 74,000 over the past 23 years. Now, to put that in perspective, the danger multiple of that versus the probability of being killed as a US soldier in Vietnam is 0.44. What does that mean? It means that if you were a young, fit, healthy man serving on the front lines in Vietnam for the United States, you stood a certain chance of being killed. As a 2.5-year-old girl, white girl in South Africa, or a 95-year-old granny, you stand almost half the chance of dying. In other words, it's just a little bit more than double that a chance that a soldier would die in Vietnam than a 2-year-old girl would die at the hands of a black person in South Africa. And this is a very inconvenient fact for many people, but it is a fact. And of course, this is all based on statistics and formal records and what have you. To give you another indication, the murder rate of white farmers in South Africa by black people is 2.02 times the murder rate of our policemen. And we're talking about policemen in one of the most dangerous societies in the world. So it's twice as dangerous to be a white South African farmer being murdered at the hands of a black person specifically than it is to be a policeman in our country. These are unfathomable statistics, and There's no direct comparison anywhere in the world. There's nothing like this anywhere in the world. So we would have thought that by now, perhaps, certain countries would have made it, at least if not accorded us refugee status, which, by the way, Sakelanders as an organization does not agree with. We do not wish to become refugees. We are bitterly opposed to it. But if you ask the question in principle, Mike, then in principle, the answer that I give you is that one would have expected that certain countries in the world would have at least made it easier for us to get in. Even if we didn't get refugee status, made it not quite so difficult for us to get into those countries.
So what's going on there is you have an economy that's in dire straits. You have this unrest, this murder rate. I don't know how you get through a single day, Simon. I really don't. Now, let's just take Cape Town, for instance. Is it safe for a white family to go into Cape Town?
Yes, it is reasonably safe by our standards. Cape Town is one of the cities that has been least affected by this let's say, race-based crime. But there has been a massive influx of what are known as economic migrants into Cape Town over recent years, and it now has a sizable black population. I remember visiting Cape Town when I was about 21 years old, which was 25 years ago, and seeing literally, it was a talking point at the time, and I'll never forget it. In the 3 weeks that I was in Cape Town, I saw literally one black person. It was all white people and colored, mixed race people. Now there are millions of black people who've kind of swooped down on Cape Town because it has a vibrant economy, there is reasonably greater chance of employment and so on. So the crime profile in Cape Town is changing, and Cape Townians will tell you that, but it is still relatively safe.
Well, now, Simon, you're here in the United States, in Ohio. What is it that brought you to the United States? What are you doing? And how can people maybe come hear you speak?
We came to the United States on the 4th of March for the purposes of raising funds. We're here to draw urgent attention to this crisis in South Africa, and through that to raise funds for the purchase of civilian vital necessities for this anticipated civil war. It has got nothing whatsoever to do with arms and ammunition, and absolutely not. If we are riddled with spies. Our organization is riddled with spies. Our government pays tens upon tens upon tens of millions to people to penetrate us, to try and catch us out, and we've never once been successfully prosecuted because we obey international and South African law rigorously. Therefore, I can assure anybody that we are speaking now only of civilian vital necessities, such as clothing and shelter and fuel and medicine, particularly, and food, of course. So our purpose was, or is, to be here to raise funds, and people can donate through our website. In the bottom right-hand corner of that website that I described earlier is a PayPal link, and we are raising awareness through interviews with people like yourself and through these live presentations to which you alluded. We have been right across the south of the USA and down the western seaboard, and we've spent some time in the Midwest. From here, Ohio, we will move through the eastern portion of the Midwest to the eastern seaboard, and we'll go from Maine all the way down to Florida before we fly home from Orlando International Airport. If anybody is interested in us speaking to them, they're most welcome to contact me through either two means. The first is hk@sakelanders.co.za. So hk@suidlanders.co.za. Or they may phone me on 386, this is a USA number, of course, 386-274-8100. 99, and I'd be very, very happy to talk to them about the possibility of doing a live presentation in their area.
And as I said, Simon, I will put that phone number and the email address in your website in the description, excuse me, in the description portion of this video. Folks, I want to encourage you to dig into what's happening in South Africa. These are good Christian people. Brindy, let's just take Brindy. Her family is in South Africa. Brindy is John B. Wells' new wife, a lovely person, very much a strong Christian woman and leader here. And her first husband, Brindy's first husband, was murdered in South Africa. That's how serious this is. So go to Simon's website, and if you can, hit that PayPal link, help them out. As he said, they're not trying to buy guns, ammunition. They're trying to buy the things that they need to prepare, just like we all do. Things they need to prepare for the times that are coming. Again, South Africa, folks, it's just all a sign of what's going on globally right now and the days of chaos that are upon us. Simon, we're going to have to wrap it up, but I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing what's going on. I would like to bring you back on the show when you're on the Eastern Seaboard to just get an update as to what's going on and how your journey has been. But I will tell you that all of our listeners to this show will be praying for South Africa and for a peace to come. Somehow, inspired by God, hopefully, peace will come to your land. So is there anything you'd like to say in closing, Simon?
No, except thank you very, very much for having us. Mike, it's people like you who've permitted us to circumvent the mainstream media's blackout of this unprecedented crisis globally. And so I say a very sincere thank you on behalf of the nation to you, Mike.
Thank you, Simon. That's very kind of you to say. Folks, thank you for joining us today on this show. Later, we'll be interviewing Lisa Haven. Tomorrow, we'll be interviewing Ray Gano. And then we will, of course, take Sunday off. To each and every one of you out there, again, please pray for South Africa. Pray for the peace to come between the blacks and the whites there. Because I don't think that peace will come without God intervening. Until we see you the next time on the Watchman's Report, God bless each and every one of you. Please remember to visit www.hearthewatchman.com. Get signed up for our conference in Boise, Idaho, August 18th through 20th, and get yourself prepared spiritually and physically for the days to come. Till I see you again, have a wonderful and a blessed afternoon.